Well, March Madness is here in all of its splendor, and it has been fantastic so far. Seeds are playing through. We have had upset alerts. Players are battling to the bitter end because they know that they do not want their season to end. Half the spots in the Sweet 16 are set, and we get the other half today. Let's dive in. It all starts right now here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Happy Monday, friends. It is March 25th, 2024. I hope your bracket is somewhat in good working order and that you picked with a combination of both your head and your heart. Or maybe you did it by just who has the most adorable mascot. Whatever works for you, I hope it looks okay. I am Missy Heidrick, national correspondent at The Next. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, you can follow me at Missy Heidrick, and then be sure to follow this podcast at Locked On WBB. And then you come over to The Next Hoops and follow all of my amazing colleagues who have you covered from start to finish as it relates to women's basketball all across the country in the tournament and everything else beyond that. www.thenexthoops.com. Well, the 2024 NCAA Tournament is here, and we are halfway to filling up the Sweet 16. There have been great games all over the country at first and second round sites, and we are going to break some down for you today. What's been happening in the great place of Raleigh, North Carolina? What's been happening with SEC teams that have made it into the field of 68? And what is brewing in Baton Rouge as the defending champs, the LSU Tigers, advance to the Sweet 16? Well, here to help us find all of the answers is one of my fantastic colleagues at The Next and someone who knows the SEC like the back of her hand, Gabriella Lewis. Welcome. Good morning to you, my friend. You are in Raleigh, North Carolina, getting set for a second round game there on the campus of North Carolina State, NC State. Let's talk about these first and second round games that you saw. The first was North Carolina State and Chattanooga, and then you had Tennessee and Green Bay. Talk to me about both of these teams, what you saw in really two big wins and decisive wins, but yet setting up for a really great matchup here this afternoon.
Yeah. So we started off with the Tennessee Green Bay game, and was close in the first half. Green Bay played very good defense, and then Tennessee just simply ran away with it, ending the game winning by 29 points, which I think a lot of people have had a lot of questions about Tennessee this season for very good reason, myself included. But the thing about Tennessee is they know how to win in March, in my opinion. They almost beat a South Carolina's undefeated season in the SEC tournament. And here they are beating, first round teams by 29. Last year, they beat both first and second round teams by 45. And Rukia Jackson is the key to that success. And I think just watching her play over the past couple of weeks, but also the past 2 years, she is just such high caliber talent. And she also likes to talk trash. So that's a plug for a story I did this week. If you want to learn how to talk trash with Rukia Jackson. And then on the other side, you've got Chattanooga, NC State, and that starts off slow. Both teams only score 5 points in the first 5 minutes. But Chattanooga never got an offensive rhythm. It was one of those games where you look up at the score and you go, they've only scored that many points this long. They scored something in the 30s or 40s the whole game. So NC State, had that game kind of from after those 5 minutes, it was theirs. But now we're going into an extremely exciting matchup. Also, one thing to note about the Chattanooga NC State game is that they take an official, an umpire out of the game midway through
Yeah.
at half, and they don't put in the standby. And so journalists after the game, asked about this, and the umpire was taken out for a background conflict that if they had known about, they wouldn't have put her in the game for. Quick Google search. She attended Chattanooga to get an MA. So that was a little bit of drama in Raleigh as well.
Yeah.
With the official situation. But ultimately, we've got a really exciting matchup tomorrow that we have not seen in a really long time. Wes Moore, who's the coach at NC State, and Kelly Harper and her husband John Harper, who are both coaches at Tennessee, are like best friends. Like John Harper and Wes Moore go to Vegas together every single year. And they told me many times, we try to never play each other. So they've never played each other in NCAA tournament. They haven't played each other since they were both in the Southern Conference years ago. So they're kind of dreading today, I think, but it's two really solid teams that are playing good basketball right now. So I think it's going to be totally up in the air.
Well, you had that kind of interesting off the court, but yet on the court situation with the officials, which we'll come back to in just a second. But I want to ask you about Tennessee, because I think one of the question marks throughout the course of the year was the fact that there was a lot of I think there was a lot of momentum behind this Tennessee team over the last few years. Kelly Harper's gone hard into the portal. She's brought in new players every year. It's taken them a while to gel. She had brought in Destiny Wells, who was a transfer from Belmont, who was supposed to take over that point guard position, be not only a great facilitator, but a scorer. They lose her to a season-ending injury. That's a big gap that they had to fill. Rickea Jackson missed some time. It just never felt like this was a group that was really all together for most of the season. Is it now sort of this idea that this might be when the Vols are peaking at the right time because everybody's there and they know what they have?
I think so, definitely. And, I think Tamari Key is a part of that as well. Tamari's still not playing the basketball she played before last year, but she sat out the whole last year and she really wasn't herself for a lot of this year. And, I've been speaking with her a lot about patience, how to get back from that. So I think her, Rickea being back. And I also just think they've built a chemistry that's better than even last year's team. Being in that locker room has just been infectious, like just pure joy from them. So I think that they're at a really solid place. And, the thing about Kelly Harper is she schedules the most challenging schedules in the country, right? Their opening game was against USA Basketball, which is like not an easy matchup. And, they played NC State in scrimmages in the fall, behind closed doors. So I think that they're meant for the bright lights, and they always have to work things out. They were like this last year. Probably this is even a little bit more challenging than last year, but from my time covering them, that's kind of how it goes.
As we talk about NC State, as you said, they get a big win over Chattanooga. They played really good defense, as did Tennessee in their game against Green Bay. And keep in mind, Green Bay's been a squad. They were getting votes throughout the season in the AP Top 25. That is not a walk in the park when you see Green Bay on your bracket. But as we talk about the Wolfpack, what Wes Moore has done, there were a ton of question marks for them, a young roster, a lot of new faces. They molded it, put it together. Is there something that has stood out to you as you see this team in action in person, first round, that says they're dialed in? This is a group that knows they have a big opportunity ahead of them today.
Yeah, I think River Baldwin is a good example of that. She didn't get maybe as many touches on Saturday as she should have, but she's a really talented post. And so I think if they can feed her as well as they can, like that'll be great. Sanaya Rivers, I think, another good example of that, or of a really talented player. So, I think Wes Moore is just such a like a figure in this sport. He's been coaching for 35 years. The funny part about him is basically everyone you mention, including the official that was taken out of the game, he goes, "Well, I recruited them back in blah blah blah." And he goes, "That's what's tough about being old." And so I just think when you have someone like that at the helm, it's really powerful. But also, it's been brought up that they've never been to a Final Four. And, he talked the other day about losing to UConn a couple years ago in what, double overtime in the Elite Eight, and just how crushing that was. And so I don't know if this is a team that like it's not proven how far they can go in this success. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think they could lose today. So, I think they've got what it takes with more at the helm, but it's kind of unclear and a little murky to me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, a second round game in the Portland 4 regional. That is Tennessee at North Carolina State in Reynolds Coliseum there. I believe it says 3 p.m. Central on mine. So that means it's
Yeah,
4 p.m.
4 p.m.
Eastern in
Eastern.
your universe today. And we will see whether or not that official is going to be a part of the crew this afternoon. That would
Yep,
also be an interesting story.
absolutely. Yes,
All right.
you
Well, when
got it.
we come back, we are going to whip around the country and talk some more about some of the other SEC teams, how they have fared, including the dominance of South Carolina over the weekend. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. I am Missy Heidrick. Well, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it is also available on Amazon Fire and in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. I am here with Gabriella Lewis. She is in Raleigh, North Carolina, getting set for the Tennessee NC State second round game this afternoon. That would be Monday, March 25th, depending on when you are listening and watching us. But thank you for joining us. Gabriella, let's take a quick whip around the country and talk a little bit more about where some of these other SEC teams that you have seen all season, watched from the very beginning all the way back to SEC Media Days, how they have fared in this field of 68. First, we have to talk about the dominance of this South Carolina squad. They not only ran through their first round game without two of their main players who were suspended because of the altercation at the SEC tournament with LSU, and then they literally just destroyed North Carolina yesterday, 88-41. Is there anybody that can stop this South Carolina team?
I feel like I'm having deja vu to last year of like, this is the exact question. So obviously, I don't know. To me, last year's team was even more like Teflon untouchable than this year's team. And they lost the Final Four. So I think, yes, anything can happen in March. But to beat North Carolina by the spread they did, they only let North Carolina score 41 points. And North Carolina, not a bad team in any regard. A lot of talented players. No one scored over 12 on North Carolina.
Mhm.
This team is so deep, and although they lost so much from last year, they've added so much from the 3-point line. You've got Malaysia Fulawali, who's their freshman, who is their leading scorer, and then was the SEC tournament MVP. So she is just at her peak right now of the season, and again, she's only a freshman. Um, it's going to be really hard to stop them. I think if you're doing well, I guess we've already done our brackets, but I think they are the obvious choice
Yeah.
for who's going to win this. And I was talking to someone else yesterday, and sometimes it's the team after the one that was supposed to win that does end up winning. Like last year, I think most people would have said they won, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's this one. So they've just got this depth, and Camila Cardoso is playing so well. She was out for a game over that suspension, but then you've got Raven Johnson, Tahina Pau. I mean, it's just they're so talented, and Dawn Staley is just such, she's a very talented coach, and on and off the court, I feel like they really are connected.
I always feel like it's sort of a masterclass every year when you look at what Coach Staley does with her team, simply because you look at this roster right now and there's players that are huge impact players. A year ago, they were the role player. They were the ones coming off the bench. They didn't get
Yeah.
a ton of minutes. Now, all of a sudden, they are the marquee names that everybody's talking about. That doesn't happen everywhere. And again,
No.
we know in this day and age of college sports and college basketball, people come and go, and that door is swinging every day of different faces and different people. But yet, if you can build something and give them the tools and then say, oh, hey, now this year is your year, that makes all the difference. It's a confidence builder, I think, for some of those kids
Totally.
that are on the floor.
I mean, Chloe Kitts is the best example of this. Chloe
Yeah.
Kitts played couple of garbage minutes every game last year. And I talked, and she was an early enrollee from high school,
Mhm.
and I spoke with her a lot, because she was the only person usually not getting mobbed in the South Carolina locker room. And she was very honest with me of like, I don't have that much confidence out there. I'm playing with Aaliyah Boston and all these incredible players who do, and they instill confidence in me. But to be honest, I don't feel like I'm always playing well. In the Presbyterian game, which is their first round matchup, she scores the team high of 21 points, and now, spent a lot of time in the starting lineup this year, has really come to prove herself. And, she's not fully confident. I've still been talking to her, but she's drastically improved and really like knows herself more. And I think that's just a really good example of the not the player development that the South Carolina coaching staff really brings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, a couple other teams within the SEC. Alabama, they advanced to the second round. They took one on the nose yesterday. They lose to Texas 65-54. A score to me that was maybe a little bit closer than I would have imagined, just simply
Totally.
knowing Vic Schaefer and this team that Texas has been able to put on the floor. But yet again, Christy Curry getting her team back into the NCAA tournament, sort of one of those quiet, successful teams within the SEC.
Yeah, I think Alabama doesn't get the due it needs, and I probably don't always give them the due they need. They're a really solid team. Sarah Ashley Barker is like a really talented player. She's all SEC first team, and she kind of talked about it. She didn't want to play for accolades, and she really had lost the fun out of basketball. And this year, she found the fun back. And
Mhm.
she told us at media day she's coming back to Alabama for next year. So that's exciting. Essence Cody, who's a freshman, is really good. Aaliyah Nye. So I think this is a team that has a lot of fight, and I was not convinced they were going to win that first round game because Florida State is very good. And they lost in the first round of the SEC tournament last year and this year, and they lost the first round of the NCAA tournament last year. So I was not convinced, but I think they really showed how gritty and tough they are. And Christy Curry, I think, she really believes in her teams, and they do too. And they're losing a couple people. They were also without Jessica Timmons, who is like a very solid big. So they'll lose some people this offseason, but I think they're going to be top 4 next year in the SEC.
Well, and that was a preview of a new SEC rivalry in Alabama and Texas does advance to the
Yep.
Sweet 16. Another SEC squad that has a chance to get themselves to the Sweet 16 as they did a year ago, and that would be really in some of the same situations they were last season of going on the road to a difficult environment. Ole Miss knocked off
Mm,
Stanford, got themselves to the Sweet 16 last year in 2023. Today, they match up against Notre Dame, maybe one of the hottest teams in the country,
yeah.
thinking back to what this Fighting Irish squad did in the ACC tournament. That's a 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central time matchup in South Bend. Ole Miss beat Marquette in the first round 67-55. Your thoughts about Ole Miss going into Notre Dame? Can they do it for a second year in a row?
Well, first of all, last night that Iowa State Stanford game, I felt like I again was having deja vu to that
Yes.
Stanford Ole Miss game, and I just thought not everyone can do what Ole Miss did. I guess that was a just crazy big environment. So, yeah, I don't know if Ole Miss is going to miss. Who's going to win today?
Mhm.
Honestly, Notre Dame is so good,
Yeah.
and Mississippi is still missing a lot of pieces. KK Deans, who is this like graduate point guard, goes out with a season-ending injury earlier in the season. They still don't really have anyone running the point super consistently. Zakiya Stevenson, their freshman, ran the point at the SEC tournament, and she just was really inexperienced. And Coach Yo was very like honestly like I wish she was not a freshman up there.
Yeah.
Madison Scott, who's kind of their star player, she has been running the point a little bit, and she's good at it, but they need her kind of everywhere else, especially offensively.
Mhm.
Um, and so that is an issue. And then they're also without Snowda Collins, who decided not to travel with the team, who's taken a step back from the team. And so she accounts for almost 10 points per game of scoring. So that's a concern. They've won without her, but against a team as good as Notre Dame, not really.
Yeah.
So and also my biggest concern with Mississippi is they beat Marquette, but if you watch that game, it didn't look like they were going to beat them for the first 3 quarters.
Mhm.
And often they only have one person who's really clicking on offense. It's usually Marquisha Davis or Madison Scott. And if you only have one option, that's really tough. But it's a team that really like doubles down in that defensive ability, and we've seen them pull off magic before, so we definitely could again tonight. And I also think that they've learned to fight through the 4 quarters, which is something that they talked about at Stanford last year, but they still had some troubles with this year. But I think they beat Florida at the SEC tournament in a game that was really exciting. They beat Marquette, so they have a real belief in themselves always.
No, and that's the magic of March, is that you never know
Yeah,
exactly what's going to happen, but I think you are right. It could be one of the hottest teams and an incredibly talented Notre Dame squad with Hannah
yeah,
Hidalgo, and if you don't have maybe a really definitive point presence against a
yeah,
team like Notre Dame, that is going to be a real deficiency because they
totally.
can take advantage, and they're not only gonna take advantage of your ball handlers, but they are going to be able to run their show the way they want to without any pressure out front. That's a
Yeah,
difference maker. You can only keep people stopped for so long, and I think there's just so many weapons right now in this Notre Dame team, and they're going to have the advantage of playing at home.
definitely.
All right. The reigning national champions are on to the Sweet 16, and we're going to talk about this LSU Tiger squad, but there's also a lot of other things going on at the moment. On the flip side, when we come back, Gabriella and I are going to dive in. But first, a message from our friends at Stitch Fix. It is something that I absolutely adore because anyone in my house will tell you I love to shop. So you know that there is an instant confidence boost when you go shopping and you buy something that makes you feel and look good. Well, that is what you can get and what I get with Stitch Fix. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. I give my stylist online my sizes, style, budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And then they send me 5 pieces plus recommendations, pro styling service, and advice. I keep what works and then I get to send the rest back. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. As I said, I love to shop and they help me save time, which is what I am looking for, time and effort. If you don't love something, you just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/locked on. That's stitchfix.com/locked on. Stitchfix.com/LOCKEDON. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, and I am here with Gabriella Lewis. Thank you for joining us on Locked On Women's Basketball. Today, it is Monday, March 25th. We are in the middle of the NCAA Tournament, the big dance, all the action. Everyone is searching and trying to find their way onto Cleveland for the Final Four. We've got half of the Sweet 16 on the women's bracket is set. The other half will be set today. Those games start early. Turn on your television, whether you're at work or at home, or you got a little box up in your screen. Go ahead and watch some games because there are going to be some fantastic ones. Gabriella, one team that is on to the Sweet 16 is the reigning national champions out of the Albany 2 regional. The LSU Tigers, they advanced. They beat Rice in their first round game. Most had thought that it would be a very interesting matchup with Louisville. They did not get that because Middle Tennessee State upsets Louisville. And then they handled Middle Tennessee 83-56 yesterday to advance to the Sweet 16. First and foremost, let's talk about this team, maybe what you've seen from the Tigers in the sense of, are they clicking on all cylinders? We've watched the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs. They've been quiet at times, kind of went into that 3 seed, not a lot of fanfare, but yet this is still an LSU squad back in the Sweet 16.
Yeah. Right when you think you know what's going to happen with LSU, you really don't, is what I've learned, like throughout these couple of years. So they play against Rice. They only win by 10 points. It was a scary game in some moments for LSU fans. Kim Mulkey after talked about how selfish she felt like her team was being. They weren't being as collaborative as they should have been. Again, they still have a lot of really talented players. Flau'jae Johnson, I think, since the SEC tournament has been the best player on that team. And that's high praise against, Angel Reese, Anissa Morrow, Haley Van Lith, Michaela Williams. And then on Sunday, they go up against Middle Tennessee, and Middle Tennessee is a very good team. Both Haley Van Lith and Kim Mulkey the Middle Tennessee matchup were like, well, I think Middle Tennessee may come out of that. So,
Right.
No credit to Middle Tennessee, but and therefore they kept LSU to either, a couple. They were either tied or beating LSU a little bit, I believe, up until 3 quarters.
Mhm.
And so that was a moment where I thought perhaps the season is going to end for the Tigers. And they pulled it out. The Middle Tennessee's best big fouled out. They put her under some good foul pressure, and they ended up just kind of going off, won by something like 15. So they know how to finish those games, but I think it has been more close moments than I thought there was going to be, and then more than an LSU fan would probably want. I think they played better basketball in some moments yesterday, but they're still not, I think, exactly meshed together. But like I said, this is a team that continues to do the unexpected. I don't think anyone had them winning the national championship, including Kim Mulkey last year. And
Right.
so what I've learned is I just can't. I don't know what's going to happen with them a lot of the time, and I can't count them out to bring on big wins. And I keep saying this, but Angel Reese, I think, is her ability to take over a game is better than I've ever seen of hers, and that's made her an even more special player.
No, and they're going to need that because they will continue. They move on to the Sweet 16. They will be in the Albany 2 regional. They will match up more than likely with UCLA in that Sweet 16, which is one I think everybody has had their eye on and circled in their
Yeah,
bracket. But let's talk for a moment here at the end today about sort of the off the court hubbub and
hmm
what is swirling, I guess everyone would want to talk about around Kim Mulkey and this LSU program. And I think LSU being thrown into it, this could very much be more about Kim Mulkey than anything
hmm
else. For those of you that haven't been online or haven't seen some of the clips, there is a rumored to be a large article that is going to drop from the Washington Post. No one knows when. And it is going to be some sort of investigative expose into Kim Mulkey. She came out in the press conference in between first and second rounds, made a very decisive statement, trying to, I think, probably get ahead of this news story,
hmm
talking about defamation, talking about hiring one of the best defamation law firms in the country to go after the Post, to go after this journalist. There's a lot to unpack here, Gabriella, but
hmm
right off the top, your first initial reactions and what you think happens next.
Good question. Um, I don't know. I think the Post piece will come out. The Post is a very solid investigative, paper. I think stories, if there's a story there, it often needs to be told. Kim Mulkey is a decisive figure. Objectively, there are plenty of people who sing her praises, and there are plenty of people who played for her who really have had challenges with her. I think most publicly, Brittany Griner is the best example, who in her memoir and in the press after she graduated talked a lot about the treatment she had at Baylor. Um, I'm personally interested in reading the story. I think a lot of the country is.
Mhm.
I think that LSU is already a school. The thing that Kim Mulkey talked about is she talked about a lot of things, that she was hiring defamation lawyers, etc. But she also talked about how um, the country hates journalists for this reason, because they keep spinning lies, and that the media is extremely distrustful. And that's a narrative we hear all the time.
Yeah.
And I think is one that is extremely apparent at LSU, and amongst, people like Kim Mulkey who don't have trust in the media. And I won't put if that's good or bad, but that also means that it's only become more challenging to tell stories about these players and about this program. And I think a lot of good storytelling will probably be lost in that shuffle.
Mhm.
And so we'll see. And I think it's going to be really tough. It's going to be tough to cover them continuously. So we'll see. And also, it's just interesting how it's coming out now. I'm sure that's literally no one wants, on the LSU side. But I think it may galvanize them more than anything. Flau'jae Johnson, I'm sure other players maybe said things, but she posted after this press conference with Kim Mulkey, she tweeted a photo of her and Kim hugging, and kind of a cryptic message about being kind to people. So,
Mhm.
a lot of the players on her roster really stand by her, and there are probably some players who maybe don't feel as strongly, but it may galvanize them. But what I'm also interested in is, Kateri Poole was on that team and departed in December or January. Angel Reese was suspended for 5 games, so we still don't know what happened with that. And I'll be curious to know if that's part of what the Post reporting is. But again, we don't know, and I'm not sure really anyone knows right now.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's just such an interesting, as you point out, it is an interesting time of which this discussion has started. We all sit now and wait. And I think, as just like you, everyone is very interested to read this. I think we have to give the credit, as you said, to the Post, because they are a very well respected journalistic entity that they, for decades upon decades, have done investigative journalism
Mhm.
and are always going to give subjects an opportunity to respond. That was one of the things that Kim Mulkey pointed out, that there's been someone asking questions of her for the past 2 years. She did not take the time to do that, and then was given an opportunity and said it was not enough time. So
Mhm.
some of this is a ebb and flow and goes both directions.
Mhm.
It will be very interesting to see, as you said, does this galvanize this team? Is it something that becomes polarizing? Is it something that they can just completely let kind of fall and water run off your back? Or does it become the bigger story and outshine what happens on the floor for this team as they head
Yeah.
into the Sweet 16?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we're all waiting with bated breath.
No doubt, no doubt. All right. Well, Gabriella Lewis, my friend, you will be in Raleigh, North Carolina today. Where is everyone going to find you from here on out throughout the NCAA tournament as we move on?
Underscore Gabriella Lewis on Twitter. Yeah, please. I'll be tweeting all the things and some good stories coming out this week.
You got it. All right. Well, that game tips off this afternoon, and that is 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, Tennessee, NC State, Reynolds Coliseum, Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you so much for being with us
Yeah.
today. You can find me at Missy Heidrick on X, formerly known as Twitter. And then all of my amazing colleagues follow this podcast and get over to the nexthoops.com coverage all day, every day. Join me back here next Monday. We're going to talk more about this NCAA tournament. We're marching into big wins and headed straight to the Final Four and Cleveland, and come back all week because we have you covered, not only in college basketball breakdown, but international news and notes. The WNBA is heating up. We have it all. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Enjoy, everybody. Halfway through to the Sweet 16, it will be set by the time we get to the end of today. And I hope your bracket is somewhat still in order. Best of luck. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.